So how long are you going to be in this residency?
Residency really was for me to experience the house itself, to come up with ideas for works for the show. So that's why it was done about 3 months ago now.
Yeah.
So since then, I have been creating work in response to my experiences there.
Yeah, I think that's important because, there's always a kind of, possibility to turn the living process directly into the final realization. But you didn't really choose that. But in the meantime, there's also behind the whole very conceptual appearance of the work, of the project, basically, taking over different rooms with this different strategies to use the rooms and also the context, and sometimes directly responding to some objects there, right? And so on. And that helps to create the kind of conceptual frame of the kind of conceptual substance of the work, and that it's pretty rational, so it's quite different from what you wanted to say through this connection with Buddhism. In a way, maybe I have a misunderstanding of what Buddhism in your mind, because it's really interesting that you talk about the tree is the tree, but you have to go through a step, which is thinking the tree as a knowledge, but at the end you arrive the tree as the tree, which it's no longer as concept, but it's not the origin of the tree, and so on. So this process is pretty conceptual, but very different from the final outcome as a form. So I think that's interesting to see how you negotiate this two kind of connected, overlapped, but also distant frameworks of minds.
Very interesting way of putting it, and let's get into it. I think the impetus for my thinking in terms of how can life be not made into art, at least become the impetus to make art from. So I started to think of if David Ireland himself could make looking out of one of his windows and create work by narrating it, then what is the possibility to be inspired by that way of thinking, i.e. the things out there's nothing special out there, right? In a common sense, but by his blocking up the window, that gesture, that intervention, you can call it conceptual intervention or intellectual intervention, somehow transcends that very ordinary daily occurrence to be a little bit more general, to be more about perception all of a sudden. Then other people could benefit from his way of seeing the ordinary things. And that was very intriguing to me. And that experience and observation really intrigued me to make actually two pieces in response. One was right next to that window that he blocked with a plate. I built a blind that would have covered that window, right? So that is also a kind of a conceptual device for me to speak to what is hidden, how is meaning created, because the blind itself very ordinarily is used to cover a opening on the window. But by me just installing the blind directly on the wall, it creates this conundrum of like, what is covered, or is there anything that is covered, or is it signifying something else? So those ways of questioning is really how I approach my work.
Yes.
So
And in a way, one also can say this is a potential a strategy or a how to say a gesture to activate something which was potentially there.
correct, very much so, very much so. And for me, there are two layers to it. One is that I genuinely believe everything in the daily existence has its own special position. Secondly, I do believe that those small details in the daily occurrences, they can be really the catalyst to some more creative work. And so for one piece, for example, I picked a wall that happened to have a lot of like very prominent cracks and paint lines. There's a wall, for some reason, David painted in two different colors. And there is a very clear dividing line there. And then there are some holes and so on it. And what I did was I just took a picture of the wall itself. And then I printed it on paper in life size. And then I put it back on the same area on the wall, directly on the wall. And because the scale, the size is exactly to the same size as the real thing, so the patterns, they all matched up perfectly. And in so doing, all of a sudden, this piece of paper somehow transformed itself into some kind of a transparent material. Our eyes, it looked like we're seeing through something at the wall. But in reality, you can see the thickness of the paper on the side. You know it is not, right? So it is my interest to present this illusion in life that we all encounter, but while at the same time, I disclose the mechanism that this illusion is created, so that people get both opportunities to see how we're kind of in a way deceived. And at the same time, if you really give yourself the allowance to contemplate on it, and then you can really perceive what are we perceiving, how we perceive. Things like that is very intriguing to me from this.
Yeah, here makes me, this makes me think about a very connected but really different, even opposite example, which is Joseph Kossuth, who looks into creating a three kind of readings of an object, a concept, and an image, right? In a very rational way, rather than
the chair.
Yeah, the chair, the chair itself, the image of the chair, and the definition of the chair, the dictionary words of the chair, right? And that was somehow extremely rationalist way of thinking, to look into three ways of defining, try to be exhaustive in terms of how human brains perceive the world, and try to fix it, try to memorize, and try to turn it into a kind of permanent knowledge, and so on and so forth. And why in your way of dealing with this kind of repetitive tautological appearance, it's not, the importance is not the image. The importance is this process of how to say, grasp a kind of particular moment of the contact between an object, a light, and a human being, which is not a rationalist kind of approach about perception, but it's much more about a kind of sensibility or a sensation of the moment. And try to render it, you call it transparent, but actually it's about creating another sphere that is coming to cover the fixed materiality and to
Exactly.
replace it. So
Yes,
I think
I like.
that's very beautiful gesture. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm just very curious about, for example, like the camera oscura,
Mhm.
which is also another example that emphasizes even more on the flow of time, the flow of things, the flow of image, shadow, air, and also human sounds, and so on.
Mhm.
So that's extremely interesting to see the confrontation between two systems of dealing with perception.
Mhm.
So apparently you don't have the same aim as Kossuth that tries to define
Mhm.
something which is by nature impossible to define.
Right. Right.
So somehow I think your device is trying to live its own way, but in the meantime, trying to not to really hold on it, but somehow propose a kind of veil, a kind of screen through which people can enter into this process.
Yes, beautiful. That's very, very beautiful way of putting it. Very accurate as well. In the context of Kossuth methodology, I think by contrast, my approach is more experiential. So I don't prescribe definitions or solutions. I'm a little bit more humble than he is that way. Rather, I do have things to say about any subject matter, and the way I say it is by creating this situation so that it provides possibility for the viewers or participants to possibly enter through it through the way I create it, so that they make their own conclusions. Say, for example, the chair. It's very interesting you bring up the chair piece, because I actually did a piece with Kossuth, 3 chairs piece, which is like I took a magazine photograph of his piece, the chair, the image, and the definition. And I gave that photograph to another artist and say, make a chair out of this information. Okay, and only this information. So basically, the other artist was given this very authoritative definition of what a chair is and should be, right? It's like ex cathedra from God's, from Pope's chair, basically. But what I did for it really is to honor the very last mile of this authoritative definition of a chair, which is the receiver. When a person receives this information, what does he do with it? Okay, so for me, it's very interesting what that artist did with it. Basically, all the information that he did, definition and the actual image and so on, and the actual chair is one directional. It's whatever direction that Kossuth presented that thing was that perspective. And then he had to create the other dimensions to that same information, like the sideways and the backways, the whole three-dimensional aspects of the chair, of that conceptual chair. He had to make it up. So when you see the chair he created as a result, it's really weird, because when you look at frontally, it looked exactly like Kossuth's photograph. But on the side, it looks just wrong. No matter how you look at it, it's just like something is off, right? So for me, the fact that something is off really speaks to my viewpoint on these things, because everybody is doing a recreation when they are handed a certain visual information or textual information. They have to do this recreation. I don't know, for me, not just Kossuth's piece, any like really great masterpieces. I don't know how many times I've sat in front of the Mark Rothko's painting in Roma. I was just, every single time I was transfixed, until one time I didn't feel anything. He said, what happened? It's the same painting, but I was different that day. And I didn't get anything out of it, So that really was a very pivotal moment for me as a creator myself. I
Mhm.
become so much less fixated on what I'm handing it to
Mhm.
other people. Rather, my focus shifted to be on the viewer.
Mm.
The last part of this artistic circle, because art is, in my view, art is not complete until it is met with the viewer, right? And
Mhm.
what they do with whatever you create is my emphasis. So in that
Mhm.
context, what I did with the camera obscura and the other pieces really is to create this situation in that piece itself. You can actually literally enter into the situation, and you feel it out. You feel out all the visual and other sensorial information, and you actually experience how you actually perceive that phenomenon yourself, and then you come to a conclusion. I don't know what I'm telling you. I am just presenting it to you, including the image is upside down, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden we might become so aware of the fact that everything we see in the actual world is upside down. But somehow we never become conscious of it because our eyes, our retina somehow flipped it before we actually perceive it. All of those little details, I find it is very interesting and useful and helpful to bring it to the awareness of the participants. So that's how I approach this series of works.
Yeah.